Welcome to the Copper King Mine and Railroad. Today we're going to talk about the diesels. They came in the late 1970s at the mine, so stay tuned. Diesel locomotive roster at Bingham. Luckily, we have an old diesel locomotive roster from Bingham Canyon Mine. Now that's thanks to Don Strack and his UtahRails.net. His webpage has all this wonderful information that he has collected about Utah railroads over the years. So let's take a look at this roster and try to find photographs to match up with each unit. The Bingham Canyon Mine had an all-electric railroad for many years, from the late 1920s into the late 1970s, so almost 50 years. These electric motors gave them great service for many years. Open-cut mining started at Bingham in 1906. They first used steam engines to help dig away at this mountain. They were small Davenport and Porter saddle tank and side tank locomotives, 0-4-0. The locals fondly referred to them as dinkies. Over time, the locomotives got bigger with more power, like Baldwin 0-6-0. These small locomotives were around until the late 1920s. In 1926, Utah Copper started testing different motive power at the mine. The electric motors won out. The first group were GE 85-ton steeple cab. In 1928 until 1929, they arrived at the mine. Then more were added over the years. In 1937, a group, in 1942, 1952, and the last ones came in 1955, getting bigger over the years, ending with GE 125-ton locomotives. Now, we have a couple of videos on these electric motors at the mine. You might want to check that out. This is a fun picture. It shows some of those old small steam engines they once used at the mine. They're sitting in a boneyard. Then, a later picture shows another boneyard of those old steam engines, and this is up by Carfork Bridge. It was taken around 1942. Here's a close-up of that. An interesting note is that during World War II, when production levels were at their highest, Kennecott, previously Utah Copper, brought some of these old steam engines out of retirement to help with the war effort. As the 1970s rolled around, the mine electric motors were getting old, so once again Kennecott started testing, this time diesel locomotives. By lucky chance, the young James Belmont, now a famous Utah Railroad photographer, went to the mine with his family for vacation and caught both Union Pacific and Denver Rio Grande Western locomotives sitting side by side with the old steeple cab electrics at 6190 yard. The year was 1976. Kennecott was settled on the EMD GP39-2 diesel electrics. They had a specially designed Vista cab to overlook the locomotive for easier shovel loading. Don Strack has some photographs taken February 1977 of the newly arrived diesels at Dry Fork Shop. The new diesels were being checked out by Stan Long and Joe Rakich. Built by Electromotive Division General Motors Corporation. They were 59 feet long and 18 feet high. They were 12-cylinder, 2-cycle, 2,300 horsepower turbocharged engines. Other features were a smaller fuel tank of 2,600 gallons instead of the standard 4,000-gallon tank. Now, this was because of the short runs at the mine. The tanks were also mounted off the rails higher for rock clearance. The smaller fuel tank allowed room for extra air reservoir for better braking. They were also equipped with dynamic braking. Most loads came out of the mine and down a 4% grade. The first 11 diesels were numbered 779 to 789, numbered not to conflict with the pit electric numbers. The builder date on all 11 locomotives was January 1977. Most of these images were shared over the years on Facebook. Some of the photographers are Brent Peterson, James Belmont, Don Strack, Blair Carista, and others. I tried to pick pictures of diesel locomotives at work around the mine. The new diesel locomotives enabled the shovels to be larger. because they didn't have to contend with the trolley line. The next group of 10 EMD GP39-2 diesel electrics were received during different days in November of 1978. They were numbered 790 to 799. The 784 locomotive was renumbered to 910, and the 786 locomotive was renumbered to 911. For more information on all these locomotives, both electric and diesels, can be found on the roster list found at utahrails.net. As the mine moved into the 1980s, there were management changes, layoffs, and then a $400 million modernization. With many mine improvements, large haulage trucks will take over all mining operations in the pit. Trains will only be used at reload stations. The bottom train tunnel at 5490 will be used for the new conveyor belt system. By the late 1980s, it was announced that the trains will have to go. But then, on May 12, 1988, with copper prices soaring, the trains will get a reprieve. They will stay around until the prices go back down. The trains at Bingham will stay around until the 2000s. The last train out of the mine was on March 19, 2000, and the last train out of the Dry Fork Reload Station in Bingham Canyon itself was May 30th, 2001, ending the train era at Bingham. Now we have videos on the last train coming out of the mine. That was pretty interesting. You might want to check that one out also. Earlier years at the mine, mill, and smelter had a scattering of different diesels. Smelter work, then over to the refinery, at the mills for car dumpers and the yard, and at the mine at the precipitation plant. All these used diesels. After the last train out of Bingham in 2001, Kennecott will still use a few of these GP39-2 high cabs around the smelter. The rest will go out to different railroads around the country. These Vista cabs made these locomotives stand out, making the locomotives easily spotted along the railroad. The cabs were raised 26 inches higher over the main body of the locomotive. Here's some close-up views of those Vista cabs. This way the engineers could get a better view over the train for spotting the shovel. Now I think these higher Vista cabs were a reminiscence of the old electric steeple cabs. So that's the diesel roster at Bingham Canyon Mine.